I never imagined that a job cleaning high-end estates in Beverly Hills would lead me into the depths of something so dark and disturbing. For years, I worked in the background, tidying up the aftermath of wild parties and ensuring the lives of the rich and powerful remained untouched by scandal. But everything changed when I received an urgent call for a special cleaning job at Diddy's mansion. What should have been another routine task turned into a nightmarish discovery. Behind the polished marble floors and grand chandeliers, I found a hidden basement, a space far removed from the luxury of the mansion above. As I descended deeper into the shadows, what I uncovered in the basement's secret tunnels left me shaken to my core. The horrors I witnessed that night will haunt me forever, and I can never unsee what I found in those dark, concealed rooms. Introduction to the world of the elite cleaner. Working as an elite cleaner is a role that few people truly understand. It's a job that comes with an air of secrecy, a role so intertwined with the dark and mysterious side of the world's wealthiest that most people can hardly fathom what it entails. When I mention what I do to others, many picture the glamour of mansions, extravagant furnishings, and a lifestyle that seems like something straight out of a movie. They imagine the luxurious decor and the rarefied air of the social elite, things that most people only dream of touching. In a sense, they aren't entirely wrong. I've walked through homes so opulent they seem to stretch on forever, where even the rugs cost more than the home I grew up in. I've polished chandeliers so dazzling that they look like fragments of the night sky itself. These homes are dreamlike, their magnificence designed to impress and to intimidate. I've seen couches that could be mistaken for works of art, and bathrooms that could be mistaken for spas, surrounded by collections that take years to curate. But what most fail to realize is the cost of maintaining these pristine, impeccable environments. Beneath the surface of all the glittering wealth and high society, there is another side to this job, a side most people never see. No one imagines the kind of dirt I come across, and I don't mean the kind you can scrub away with a little elbow grease. I'm talking about a kind of dirt that clings to a person's soul, a deep, hidden filth that gets swept under the rug, or more accurately, buried in secret spaces where no one dares to look. The hidden messes, a cleaner's real job. When the rich and powerful call for help, they aren't looking for someone to tidy up their living rooms or make sure their furniture is polished. They need someone far more specific. Someone who can erase their mistakes without asking too many questions. They don't need a maid. They need a silent accomplice. They need someone who knows how to make things disappear. Someone who can handle their sins, their misdeeds, and their secrets. I've witnessed things that would shake anyone to their core. Things that make you question everything you think you know about the people who occupy the highest echelons of society. I've cleaned rooms that were more than just chaotic after a wild night. They were the remnants of lives teetering on the edge, full of things left behind that were never meant to be seen by anyone else. Drug residue tucked into crevices where no one would think to look, as if it was left there intentionally for someone like me to find. Toys, accessories, and items so personal and incriminating that the owners of these homes would swear up and down that they never existed. And sometimes, there were things so strange and unsettling that they left you wondering how much of it was even real. Like the time I found an exotic snake coiled up in a bathroom sink. I remember standing frozen in place, half expecting the snake to lash out at me, but it didn't. Instead, it stared back at me, its cold, unblinking eyes feeling more like a silent witness to the madness that surrounded me than a simple creature. I was in a place, that seemed to exist outside of the rules of reality. And for the first time, I wondered if I had wandered into a world I wasn't meant to understand. But despite all the chaos, despite all the unsettling sights, I was good at my job. I did what was asked of me, quietly, efficiently, and deliberately uninterested in the things I was paid to erase. Curiosity was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was not only discouraged, it was dangerous. I knew my role: erase chaos, restore order, and leave behind nothing but the illusion of normalcy. That was my job. That was how I survived in this twisted world. For years, that was enough. The paychecks were large, and the rewards for staying out of it all were plentiful. But as the years passed, something changed. Something deep inside me began to shift. Every job left a mark on me, sometimes visible, sometimes not. But it left something behind, whether I wanted it to or not. The weight of unseen messes. Every mess tells a story, and those stories are what stay with you long after you've cleaned the last speck of dust. Some stories are loud and violent, breaking furniture and shattering glass. You can feel the fear or rage that created them, lingering in the air like a heavy cloud. Other times, the stories are far more subtle, like a faint wine glass imprint on a table that was wiped clean a little too quickly. You know there's something more, something the surface can't tell you, but it's there, and it sticks to you, like the lingering smell of stale alcohol that no matter how many windows you open, no matter how many times you scrub the floor, it never truly leaves. But no amount of experience prepared me for the call I got that one night. It was a call that was different from all the others. An emergency, an urgent request, a special job that had the air of secrecy about it from the start. It wasn't just another job. This was something else, something that I shouldn't have walked into, something that would change everything. The call. Entering the belly of the beast. The call came in late one evening. I didn't recognize the number at first. My boss rarely ever called me directly. He preferred to leave the details to others. But this time, there was a shift in his tone. His words were clipped and efficient, though there was a noticeable undercurrent of tension in his voice. He told me I'd be cleaning in a basement. No questions, no curiosity. Just get the work done, and don't ask anything about it. His voice was cold, a little too cold, and for the first time, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something was off. I should have listened to that instinct, should have turned the job down. But the payoff was too good. It was one of those offers that seemed too big, too urgent, like they wanted to buy your silence before you even walked through the door. At the time, I didn't fully grasp the weight of what I was about to uncover. I didn't know that I wasn't just walking into a job, I was about to walk into a secret. Diddy's mansion, a world of excess. The mansion where I was headed belonged to none other than Sean Diddy Combs, a name known across the globe. He was an entertainment mogul, a superstar in the music industry, and his name carried weight in every corner of Hollywood. Stories about his infamous parties were legendary. They were said to be wild affairs, full of excess and indulgence, where no rules applied and no one was safe from the madness. As I drove to his estate, I wasn't surprised to see the remnants of that chaotic world spilling out into his mansion. Broken bottles littered the polished floors, and abandoned glasses teetered precariously on the edges of expensive furniture, as if the people who had once used them couldn't be bothered to care. The air was thick with the smell of cigarettes and something far stronger. The house itself, breathtaking in its sheer size and splendor, stood in stark contrast to the chaos that lay within. It was a mansion straight out of a magazine. Massive chandeliers, marble floors that seemed to stretch on forever. and walls adorned with art so expensive that most people would never see it in person. Yet despite all this wealth, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Something felt wrong, as if the house itself was hiding something. Beneath the surface of luxury, there was something darker. Something that wasn't meant to be uncovered. I could feel it, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't escape. The basement, where secrets are kept. I was greeted by the team leader, a man I had worked with many times before. But today, he seemed different. Nervous, uneasy. He barely looked me in the eye as he gestured toward the staircase. "You'll handle the basement," he said quickly, his voice barely audible, as though he was trying to rush the words out before he could reconsider. The basement. If you've been in this line of work long enough, you learn that basements are never a good sign. They are where the secrets are hidden, where people put the things they don't want anyone to see. And in this case, it wasn't just about cleaning up a mess. No, this basement was a place that housed more than just physical dirt. It held the secrets of the people who lived in the mansion above, secrets that were too dark, too dangerous to see the light of day. The journey down. As I descended the staircase, I could feel the air change around me. It grew colder, but not just in temperature. It felt heavy, thick, and oppressive, as though the space was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Every step echoed, amplifying the unease in my chest. I had done countless special jobs before, but this one felt different. This wasn't just a mess. This was something that would sink its claws into my mind and stay there, haunting me long after the work was done. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I stopped, frozen. The basement was nothing like the pristine mansion above. The walls were dark, the ceiling low and oppressive. Fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. It felt wrong, as if the very space was alive with something sinister. The basement was clearly meant for something far beyond storage. The plush, soundproofed walls, the dim lighting, and the faint smell of cigars told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a utility space. This was where the private parties took place, the kinds of events that no one was ever supposed to talk about. The extravagance of the mansion above had given way to something darker below, a space meant for excess, indulgence, and, no doubt, regret. In the center of the basement was a small stage, surrounded by metal rods that gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. The floor was a mess of spilled drinks, sticky patches, and the lingering remnants of a night of reckless abandon. The smell of alcohol, mixed with something darker, filled the air, and my shoes stuck to the floor as I moved. To the side, a bar stretched across the wall, but unlike the pristine bars upstairs, this one looked weathered and used. Bottles sat half empty, some tipped over, spilling yellowish liquid onto the floor. The counter was scattered with thin white lines, unmistakable signs of indulgence, of a night that had spiraled into chaos. It was in this space, this dark, secret place, that I would spend the next several hours cleaning up the remnants of something no one was ever supposed to see. The mess wasn't just physical, it was something far more sinister. And as I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper I cleaned, the more I uncovered, the less I wanted to know about the world that existed just beyond these walls. The furniture tells a dark tale. As I walked further into the basement, my eyes were drawn to the furniture scattered around the room. It was impossible not to notice the disarray that spoke volumes. Armchairs, once plush and inviting, now sat slumped at odd angles. Their fabrics were torn, with frayed edges that had seen better days. One of the sofas was so sunken in the middle, It looked as if it had absorbed the weight of some unspoken pain, leaving behind permanent indentations in the cushions. The stains weren't just from spilled drinks or food. It was the kind of wear and tear that left behind a much more disturbing impression. The sofas appeared to bear the burden of long nights filled with tense conversations or emotional upheaval. In the far corner of the room, there was a broken chair, its back splintered, and the wood jagged and raw. It stood frozen in time, almost as if it were an exhibit in a twisted museum. It didn't take much imagination to picture the kind of violent force that could have shattered the chair like this. I couldn't help but wonder, was this chair a casualty of an argument that turned physical? The sharp, splintered edges of the wood seemed to scream of an act of aggression, something far darker than just a rowdy gathering. It was as though the chair itself had become an unwilling witness to something it wasn't meant to see. The destruction here wasn't just the aftermath of a wild party. It was something deeper, something that left a stain on the very fabric of the room. This was violence, perhaps even rage, wrapped in the guise of a social gathering. The shattered chair was a piece of evidence, a silent witness to a moment of chaos that no one ever intended to remember. But what unsettled me more than the broken furniture, more than the disarray, was the silence. It was heavy, palpable, and suffocating. The silence was not just the absence of sound. It felt alive in the space, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. The loudness of the destruction in the room seemed to be absorbed by the quiet, and I could feel it creeping under my skin. Every small sound I made, the squeak of my shoe against the floor, the faint scrape of my cleaning cloth across a table, was amplified, bouncing back at me as though the walls were mocking me, reminding me that I didn't belong here. It wasn't just a quiet room. It was a room that held its breath, waiting for something. What? I couldn't say. But I could feel the tension. I could feel the anticipation in the air, the sense that the room wasn't just holding on to memories. It was waiting for something else, something worse to happen. The unsettling sensation of being watched. As I continued cleaning, trying to push past the dread creeping into my bones, a sensation began to crawl over me. A feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. It wasn't the usual discomfort you feel when you catch someone's eyes from across a room. No, this was different. It was deeper, more ingrained. It was as if the very walls of the basement were observing me, tracking my every move. The basement, with its flickering lights and cold, damp air, seemed almost alive, suffused with an eerie presence. It felt like the room itself was sentient, like it had witnessed far too much, and now sought to keep its secrets buried deep within its corners. The shadows were darker than they should have been, the silence more oppressive than I could ever have imagined. Every movement I made, every flick of my wrist, every step across the floor, was met with an unseen force that held me in place, waiting for me to do something, anything, that might break the stillness. I shook off the feeling, focusing hard on the task at hand, but it lingered. That subtle, yet ever-present sensation of eyes upon me, of unseen forces pressing in from all sides. It was as if the room were holding its breath, waiting for something to break the fragile tension that hung in the air. The discovery. A hidden door. It wasn't long before my cleaning cloth caught on something unusual behind the bar. One of the wooden panels didn't align perfectly with the others. It was almost imperceptible at first, a tiny flaw in the seamless veneer that adorned the walls. But something about it caught my trained eye, something that didn't belong. My hand hovered for a moment over the surface, unsure whether to proceed. The urge to ignore it, to simply continue with the work, was strong. But I couldn't. Not this time. As I ran the cloth over the panel, I heard it, a faint click. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, holding my breath. It wasn't a loud sound, but it was enough to shatter the silence that had settled in the room. Slowly, I pressed my hand against the panel. It slid aside with unsettling smoothness, as if it had been waiting for me, anticipating my discovery. The hidden compartment revealed itself with little resistance, as though it had been designed for just this moment, for someone to find it. Behind the panel, I was confronted with a heavy trap door, its rusty hinges creaking with age, the locks worn and weathered, standing out against the otherwise sleek, modern design of the basement. The contrast was stark. This was a space hidden away, concealed from the world above. For a moment, I stood there, my body stiff with indecision. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, to ignore what I had just uncovered. I could easily slide the panel back into place, leave the trapdoor untouched, and pretend I had never seen it. But something deeper than fear, something more primal, urged me forward. It was as if the basement itself was calling to me, drawing me toward whatever lay beyond the trapdoor. The descent into the unknown. With trembling fingers, I gripped the latch, taking a deep breath before pulling the door open. The sound of the rusty hinges creaking under the strain echoed through the basement, louder than I had anticipated, sharp and jarring in the unnatural silence. It was a warning. I should have listened to it, but I didn't. As the door slowly opened, the darkness beneath it was revealed, an iron staircase leading down into what could only be described as an abyss. The smell hit me first, a thick, pungent stench that seemed to wrap itself around me like a suffocating fog. It was a mixture of mold, rust, and something far more disturbing, something foul, acrid, and unnatural. The very air seemed to pulse with a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. I fumbled for my flashlight, my fingers slick with sweat as I struggled to turn it on. When the beam finally cut through the darkness, I was confronted with an empty staircase that seemed to stretch down forever. The light from my flashlight flickered, but no matter how far I aimed it, the darkness seemed to consume it. The stairs twisted downward, disappearing into the void. The air felt colder now, almost biting, and with each step I took, the silence grew more suffocating. I should have turned back. I knew that. But some primal force within me, compelled me to take that first step down into the unknown. The tunnel below, unearthly and unforgiving. Each step I took echoed in the confined space, amplified by the narrowness of the staircase. The cold metal of the steps bit into the soles of my shoes, grounding me in the reality of my decision. The deeper I descended, the thicker the air became. It wasn't just cold, it was oppressive, as if the very atmosphere was trying to stop me, to prevent me from going any further. By the time I reached the bottom, the silence had been replaced by a low, constant hum. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the air, like distant electricity running through unseen wires. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I swung my flashlight around, cutting through the dense darkness. What I found was a narrow tunnel ahead. The walls were rough, concrete, damp and cold to the touch. But it was the markings on the walls that caught my attention first. At first, I thought they were simply the result of wear and tear. But as I looked closer, the scratches began to appear more deliberate. Some of the scratches were shallow and thin, as if they had been made by fingernails, human fingernails. Others were deep, jagged, and wide, as if something far more forceful had created them. My stomach twisted as I traced the lines with my flashlight. Each mark seemed to tell a story I didn't want to hear, one that my mind struggled to suppress. The smell in the tunnel was overwhelming now. It was more than just the mold and rust. It was something rotten, something decayed. A sickly, rancid odor that made my throat tighten and my body recoil. I steadied myself against the wall, trying to fight back the urge to gag. I knew I had to continue, but the weight of it all, the smell, the darkness, the unsettling feeling of being watched, was beginning to break me down. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, each step pulling me deeper into the heart of the darkness. Then, the passage split. To the left, there was nothing but an impenetrable blackness, as though the darkness itself had swallowed the light. But to the right, something caught my attention. A large, rusted metal door. It was a stark contrast to the rough concrete walls surrounding it. The door was covered in dark, dried stains, streaks of something that had long since been spilled or left behind. The stains led to the floor, where they had hardened into brittle trails. The door, a final barrier. Near the top of the door was a small circular window, just large enough to peer through. My hand trembled as I approached the door, my flashlight beam flickering in the oppressive air. Through the small window, I could make out only shadows. Whatever lay behind that door was hidden from me, shrouded in darkness. My legs felt as though they were made of stone, frozen in place by a fear I couldn't explain. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, to leave this place, and never look back. But I couldn't. Something stronger than fear, something beyond curiosity, pulled me forward, urging me to push past the terror. I reached the door and hesitated for only a moment before gripping the corroded, icy doorknob. The moment I touched the knob, the distorted reflection of myself in the circular window stared back at me, warped and eerie under the dim light. It was as if the glass itself was warning me, telling me that this was not a place I was meant to enter. But despite the warning, I couldn't stop myself. The compulsion was too strong. I swallowed hard, summoning every ounce of courage I had left. With a deep breath, I turned the handle. The door creaked open with a deafening sound that echoed down the tunnel like a scream. What lies beyond? A chilling discovery. What lay beyond the door was enough to make my stomach drop. In the center of the room, illuminated by a single dim bulb that swayed slightly above, was an industrial freezer. Its steel surface was scratched, dented, and stained, standing as the grim centerpiece of the room. The shelves lining the walls were stacked with boxes, each one vacuum-sealed and neatly labeled. But it wasn't the boxes that made my breath catch. It was the labels. They weren't brands or inventory numbers. They were names, full names, written hastily in a shaky, irregular script. As I scanned the shelves, the names seemed to leap out at me, staring back with an eerie silence. Names I didn't recognize, yet felt like silent accusations. I couldn't move, my heart racing as I reached out to grab one of the bags. The plastic was cold and slick, damp with condensation. My hands trembled as I held it up to the light. The weight of what I was holding sank in, and I could no longer ignore the sickening feeling in my gut.